Hi. In order to demonstrate exactly what my something awesome was and exactly how I achieved it and what I did achieve, I think it was a lot more effective to actually make a video recording as opposed to writing anything down. It would be a lot more easy to understand. So before I go, let's just sort of clarify the claims, which were one of tool use, and the second one was of thinking like an engineer. For the thinking like an engineer claim, most of the evidence can be found down here. However, for the tool use, it's a lot better with this video because it'll sort of break it down very nicely, and it's a lot easier to understand because it's obviously very specific to a very niche sort of software. So in terms of what I'll be demonstrating in this video, I'm going to be going through this tool use category here and sort of demonstrating what what software I used, what I did, what I used. So I decided to use an architecture modeling software called Autodesk Revit. It's a building information modeling software, and it's really popular. It's a really famous software, used around the world. And I use it quite frequently at work, but only in terms of the application side of it. I've never actually developed anything inside the software itself. So when I was at work, they sort of decided what's a good idea to sort of make as a developer at work in an architecture company. They said is actually develop tools and macros for the Autodesk software itself. Now, since this is really popular software, it's used as like a primary software for modeling at work. They said creating customized tools is actually really helpful to them. So I thought, okay, that's not a bad idea. So we went to a few meetings, and I was briefed, and I decided to use the integrated development environment, which is actually internal within inside the Revit environment itself, which I'll hop onto. And I decided to use the language C#. I could have used multiple languages. There's a choice between VB.NET, C#, Python, etc. And again, I'll get into more specifics later on. So I'll be demonstrating exactly what I've done and why I decided to use that through this video. So yeah, let's get right in. Okay, so here I've opened up Revit, and in order to get you started, let me just tell you what's going on. So basically, what I've done here is I've just created a little sort of test model, in 3D, and it's just it's a very simple model. I mean, you can see floor slabs and walls, etc. It's a very architectural thing, obviously. And I'll just sort of break down exactly what the concept is. So in Revit, you build these sort of 3D models, and the beauty of this is the fact that the project is actually broken down into multiple, let's say, segments. Yeah. So, and these segments are, you have things such as views, sheets, schedules, families, groups, etc. But the only thing you really need to know in order to get familiar with in the project browser will be views and sheets. Now, the views are actually divided into different types of views. So there's things such as structural plans, floor plans, ceiling plans, 3D views, elevations, renderings, etc. And the elevations and 3D views and floor plans, I guess they're quite commonplace, and obviously you'd understand what they are. So let's go to, for example, one floor plan. I'll just activate that, and I'll go to level 0. And this is my level 0 floor plan. I know it looks incredibly boring, but it's a floor plan. So that's a floor plan, and suppose if I go to any 3D view and I just select one and I go to perspective, this is actually pretty cool 3D view. And I mean, I set it up beforehand so that like I don't have to waste any time. So this is a 3D view. I could always rotate it around or whatever, which is kind of nice. And I can just let's have a look at one elevation view. Let's say the north elevation. Great. So that's the north elevation. Again, it's really boring, really simple, but that's not the point. Awesome. So the second big thing that you want to look at is this thing here called sheets. So what sheets are basically, let's actually activate this one, which I've just sort of set up at the moment. Sheets is basically what's going to be printed out. So in an architecture environment, you need to print out documents, and there's usually, for a large project, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sheets, and those are very large sheets. For example, this one's an A0 size. Anyway, not necessary, but so these packages are always given out, and there's always large amounts of sheets that are exported out to contractors and engineers, etc. So the problem that I had at work, or the problem that was discussed with me, was that when they had to duplicate multiple sheets in Revit, that can't be done. For example, if I was to create a new sheet, let's go right click, new sheet, select a tab block, go okay. So I've just created a new sheet, and suppose I want certain views in here. Suppose I go, okay, I want level 1. I just drag the views and pop it into the sheet. So a sheet is kind of like a paper, I guess, and then the views are essentially drawings. So I'll just adjust the view here and make it fit. Great. So for example, like that, and I've just created one view. And with views, you can actually duplicate views and make as many copies as you want. So I can just right click on level 1 and go duplicate view and go duplicate, and bang, I have another copy. So level 1 and level 1 copy 1 is exactly the same. Well, I don't need that, so I'll just delete it away. But however, when you come to sheets, which is what will be exported, when I go right click, I can't duplicate anything. Sheets in this software cannot be duplicated. And this is quite a commonplace problem where we have multiple views on one sheet, and we have to, we have extremely similar packages where every view is almost the same. And we have to make so many copies, it becomes extremely tedious. So one of the architects recommended that if I can create something which is able to duplicate all these sheets and put it into a new package itself, that would be extremely convenient. Another request was the one that I was actually going for, which unfortunately I wasn't able to get to it, was that when you do have multiple sheets, so suppose you have this is sheet 1 and that's sheet 2. Suppose in a realistic sense you have about 200 different sheets which go all the way down there. What they wanted to do is actually do the opposite. So they wanted to delete all the sheets that were not necessary and only export the 3D model. And that's usually used so when you're exporting out to different contractors. So I wasn't able to achieve that macro, but we'll get back to that later. So what I decided to do is I decided to use the same sort of progress of that code and create a duplication method as opposed to a deletion method. And I'll demonstrate that using macros itself. So in order for us to set up a good sheet that we're able to use, I just popped in the rendering view, i.e. the 3D view, perspective view, and popped it inside. So now I have a sheet that is actually something that I want to duplicate several times over. Now, as I mentioned, the actual task that I wanted to complete was able to, if we, for example, had 200 different sheets, I wanted to delete all the sheets and all the views and only contain the 3D model. However, I wasn't able to achieve that in the macro because too many bugs and failures, so I obviously didn't have enough time to focus that up. However, what I was able to achieve, so if I go to macros, edit. So basically, what I'm doing now is I'm going to open up the macro that I was originally creating using to delete the sheets, and this macro originally came into a bit of errors. So for example, over here, right here. So what this is basically the integrated development environment called Sharp Develop over there, and it's integrated into internally into Revit, and it allows you to create any different macros or functions that you want internally. It's kind of nice because it's got its inbuilt driver, its inbuilt compiler, and everything like that, which is kind of interesting. So basically, my code will start from this function over here. All of this, however, is all just an interface. So all the included files, such as using system, using autodesk.revit.ui, are basically all the header and interface files that we need for Revit itself. So this is all generic stuff. I don't have to do anything to that. What I do need to do, however, is this function here, which is called public void delete all sheets and views, and this is what I was trying to achieve. So in order to achieve this, I had to use what they call the Revit API, or the application programming environment. So it's this one here, and basically this is just a library for me to use different functions over and over again, and sort of acts as like a library, so I can sort of reference, if I need to find a function, I actually know I can, source that up right here as, for example, delete function or delete an element. I could source that and I can get like a syntax and, the C# example of what I need to put in, which is really, really useful. So I had to learn a bit of, the Revit API in order to get familiar with, with the actual programming environment. So using that, I used a lot of that in this code, obviously. And you can see that C# I found extremely easy to use because it's really similar to C itself, which is kind of nice. So this is my function here, which is going to return nothing, and it obviously takes in nothing. So this is sort of the macro code. These lines over here is basically just setting up the API and the interface settings. Again, it's very generic. It's not something that I have to do myself. I just have to just kind of copy that in. These two lines of code here, they're basically saying select every single element inside the model, except so actually everything inside the model, and then filter out the views and the sheets. So that's been happening over here. So now what we've done is at this point we've selected everything, all the views and the sheets inside the model and nothing else. So what happens over here is that I'm now starting a transaction. I mean, a transaction is basically like, what's going to execute the code. So without actually starting and ending a transaction or committing a transaction, nothing gets executed. So I started the transaction over here, and I started an increment variable, so an int count, and that's just going to increment every time a sheet or a view has been deleted. So going down, I started for each, which is kind of similar to a for loop inside of this Revit API. Which is going to sort of add every element of views or sheets that it finds. It's going to start deleting each and every single one of them. Now, deletion was going to happen in these 3 lines of here, but again, I ran into a lot of errors and I wasn't able to resolve that. So the only thing that I was able to resolve by the end of that was actually getting a counter which actually counts all the views inside the model, which I realize is still quite useful actually, because a lot of people have to count them manually. There's no way to actually select everything and just get a count itself. So this is surprisingly useful itself. So once you've written all your code, you can just go to build solution and then go close. It's just finishing. Awesome. And then just going to delete all sheets and views, which is not going to delete anything. It's just going to return the number of sheets that it iterates through. So the number of views and sheets. So number of views is detected, 38. Great, makes sense. So now we know there's 38 views and sheets included inside. You can obviously see it here, but if you open it all up, there's a bunch here, bunch there, and bunch everywhere else. Great. So since I wasn't able to achieve the deletion, I was able to go at least halfway and achieve a duplication method. So what this does, as I demonstrated before, it's very hard to sort of duplicate whole sheets with every single view in it. You have to duplicate not only the sheet manually, you have to duplicate each and every single view and then pop it inside. It's extremely tedious in Revit, and none of the guys at work really like that method. So what I was able to do is kind of reiterate what I was using for the deletion function and create a duplication function. So I just go to the sheet. Great. So this is the sheet I am in, and I want to duplicate it. For example, I want another copy of this. All I got to do is go to macros and go click on that guy, duplicate sheet, and go run. And basically, what that did is that created a brand new sheet, and that sheet is exactly the same. And not only that, each of the views inside have also been duplicated. So 1, 2, 3. So these 3 views have been duplicated into these 3 views, and you can see that reflected over here. So that's the original level 0 view. That's a duplication. That's a duplication, and that's a duplication. So that's a really effective way to actually save time and effectively and use your time more efficiently, as opposed to actually doing many tedious tasks in the office itself. And quite a lot of people are actually quite happy with that. And yeah, I mean, I hope that sort of sums it up, and that sort of demonstrates my skills in terms of what I've actually learned and what I've developed myself, not only in this different environment, but also inside the office, and also learn different methods, whether it's the C# or whether it's a different application or whatever. I mean, it's a good to sort of see the integration and application of it through communication and development inside the office, as it would be as an engineer. So yeah, that's it, and I hope that was convincing.